Fortuitous poking around as a 7-year-old brought Phil Lucas into contact with a cave in his neighborhood. Then at age 15, Phil was privileged to meet and cave with the legendary Oscar Estes. Oscar became a treasured mentor to Lucas, and along the way introduced Phil to NSS founding president Bill Stevenson. Always on the lookout for new NSS members, Stevenson promptly got the young Phil Lucas signed up to the society. Phil Lucas's underground exploits are legion and include extensive poking, prodding, digging, excavating, exploring, and surveying in the water sinks area. This fascinating karst region is located in Highland County, Virginia, positioned at the north end of Burnsville Cove, the site of the Lucas Retirement House, and the place where Phil first met his high school sweetheart, Charlotte. The Lucas-led initiative at water sinks resulted in many miles of fabulous cave being discovered, explored, and surveyed. In addition, a nature trail was developed in order to educate school groups and other members of the public about the value of caves as a resource. Deeming it appropriate to memorialize the vast amount of work done in the area, Phil Lucas published Caves and Karst of the Water Sinks area, and he received a certificate of merit from the NSS for the result. Phil is an accomplished and an award-winning photographer and cartographer. Always curious about subterranean water flow routes, Lucas has performed dye traces, some of which have charted underground streams flowing beneath surface rivers. For instance, work published in 1977 demonstrated that the Blowing Cave stream passed under the Pasture River at several locations. Phil's associated interest in air currents spawned a unique method for measuring air flow between cave entrances. Working with collaborators Nevin Davis and Frank Marks, this procedure was published under the title, A Method for Detecting Cave Connections by Inducted Airflow. Phil has also had a long-term interest in the Culverson Creek area. Along the way, Lucas teamed with Roger Baruti to hook up Lower Fuller with Culverson Creek Cave. Believing that the earlier surveys could be improved, Lucas, along with Bill Royster and others, spent a decade pushing and mapping in the Culverson Creek complex. Putting miles of cave passage on paper, Phil became an expert on Culverson Creek and in the weather events that drive the water levels in this West Virginia River complex. When these cavers were done, Phil, in company with Bill Balfour and George Dasher, authored The Caves and Karst of the Culverson Creek Basin. This tome is populated with historic photographs, detailed maps, and a boatload of adventure.
Well, these are unusual times, and when I heard that the convention had been canceled, I said, well, I guess there's no need for the Luminary talks, as there's no convention, obviously. And someone said, oh, no, we can't do that. We've got to have the Luminary talks, even if they're on video, because what you guys do when you give us that talk, you're giving us a snapshot back into history of those memories and those experiences that you have, and we don't want to lose those. Those are precious. So we want you to make this video. So that's exactly what I'll do, and I think the best place to start is at the beginning. And I'll say just right off the bat that I have a deep passion for caves. And that passion goes back to when I was 7 years old. I was tagging along with my older brother. He was 14, I was 7, so there's a 7-year span between us. And my brother and a friend of his, they had found this cave out behind the house. We live up near Harrisonburg, and they let me tag along. I don't think they were willing. I think they were coerced in doing that. But I tagged along, and I didn't know where we were going. And we walked what seemed like about a mile or so, and I was getting a little tired. And all of a sudden, this sort of a crack in the hillside opened up, flush with the hillside. And much to my amazement, my brother and his friend slid down in that crack. And I said, wow. I don't think they expected me to follow them. In fact, I'm pretty sure they didn't. But I didn't let any time go by. I slid down in that crack too. And much to my amazement, it opened up into a really neat cave. I didn't know much about caves, but it was like an underground fort or something for a kid. And I thought that was the coolest thing. And I didn't say anything for a while because they were busy in the back of this passage throwing rocks down this pit. And the rocks would go clatter, 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 clatter until you couldn't really sure if they hit bottom or not. And I said, I wonder what that is. And when they had their back turned, I slipped over there on my belly and I got to the edge of the pit and I looked down and this big void opened up down below and I said, wow. And I threw a little rock and it went clatter, clatter in there. And at that very moment, the cave bug bit me hard. And I had a passion for caves from that point on. And so we moved to Stanton shortly thereafter and need to get this clicker. And on my bicycle, if I found a crack somewhere, I would get on the bicycle with a candle in my back pocket and I'd try to see if I could get in that crack. I never did find much of a cave, but I kept trying until I got a little bit older and started getting some experience. And also, I got some buddies there. You can see this is a little cave nearby Stanton. I talked them into getting some baseball hard hats that we use for caving helmets and bought some carbide lights that a hunter had recommended at the hardware store. They had the little 3 wires sticking out, so we had to figure out how to get those attached. And went to this local cave. It wasn't very big, but we had fun. I had a lot of fun. I'm the guy up on the shelf there that's dirty. You can always tell a real caver from the non-cavers how dirty they are. And then, we were about a senior in high school, we heard about this cave in Highland County. And got pretty good directions to it. And I told the guys, I said, look, we've got our driver's license. Let's talk one of our parents into loaning us a car and let's go to Highland County, see if we can find that cave. So they said, okay. I think they really wanted to go fishing while they were out there, but off we went. And we parked across the river from the cave. Weren't sure if we were supposed to be there or not. Waded across the river, went up the steep hillside. There was sort of a path. Good thing it was a path, I wouldn't have found it. And went into this cave, Marshall's Cave. And it was a beautiful cave, a real cave. My first real caving trip. And you had to straddle over pools of water and go through little cracks and open up to a big, huge room. And I was in the 7th heaven. And my buddies, a little less so. It was a little intimidating. I was wanting to stay in the cave forever, but they were worried about the car, so they convinced me that we had to leave. And since they were driving, I had no choice. So we scampered out of the cave and went down the hillside. They got faster than I was, and I was a little bit dirty. So as I was going across the river, I was washing off a little bit. And then as I started to go up the hillside, the riverside, I noticed there was this cabin, this fishing cabin, and there was a bunch of men in front of it, and sitting in lazy boys, drinking beer, having a good time, laughing. And one of the guys stood up and walked down to the riverbank towards me, and I said, uh-oh, am I in trouble? I hope not, we'll see. And the guy walked up and says, son, he says, have you been up in that cave on the hillside? And I said, I wonder if that's his property. I said, yes, sir. He says, well, what was it like? And the floodgates opened. I talked and talked. I'm sure I bored him to death. And after about 10 minutes, when I ran out of breath, he says, well, good. I'm glad you had a good time. He says, you know, I've been in that cave. I looked at that old man. I said, I don't think so. But I said to him, you really? Have you actually been in there? And he described some of the cave and verified to me that he had been in there. And I said, well, I'm just really a lot of fun. You know, I was kind of lost for words. And he says, well, you're really excited about this cave. And you probably want to see some more caves. I said, yes, sir. He says, would you like to join a caving club? I said, well, I guess so. I don't know what a caving club is. And he says, well, there's a caving club that's scattered across the United States. It's called the National Speleological Society. And he went on to explain about that. And I said, well, Yeah, that sounds fine. He says, would you like to join? I said, absolutely, but do you have to be 21? Because I'm only 16. He says, no, we've made it so that a 16-year-old can join. And I says, well, how much is it? And he told me what it was, and I don't remember anymore. I said, well, I've got that much in my wallet. I would like to join right now. How can I do that? You know how I could do that? He says, yes, let me go get some paperwork, and I'll come back over here. And he came back, and he says, this man introduced himself as Bill Stevenson. I said, well, glad to meet you, Mr. Stevenson. I'm Phil Lucas, and I appreciate you letting me join. And I didn't know what it meant to be a member of the NSS, but I knew I was hopefully going to find out. And when I got my NSS news, I saw who Bill Stevenson really was. And I said, wow, what a lucky coincidence that was. I got the president of the Cave Club to join me up. And then the next weekend, something else really neat happened. We went to Breathing Cave, because Bill Stevenson had told us about Breathing Cave, so we went up to Breathing Cave, and there was people there from all across Virginia and even West Virginia. And there was one fellow there by the name of Oscar Estes. And here's his picture. He looks tired and worn out there, but that picture was taken when he was on a week-long expedition into Butler Cave, and so he's kind of tired, and as you would expect him to be. But on that Breathing Cave trip, Oscar was there, and he introduced himself and said, you know, you said you were from Stanton. I live in Stanton also. I said, wow, you do? He says, yes, and I go caving right often. Which I thought was a little bit of a stretch, because he was an old man. He must have been in his maybe in his late 40s. But I said, well, can I go along with you sometime? He said, you bet. I'll get your number there, and we'll see if we can't get together. And he had this old woody Jeep. And I'll tell you, there was many a trip that Oscar and I went caving. I kind of felt obligated to look after him since he was so old. But I learned many a valuable lesson from Oscar. He taught me the techniques of caving and the equipment and all that stuff. But the one thing that I learned from Oscar, not that he was teaching it, but I caught on to it, is that Oscar was a people person. He was a true Southern gentleman. A fella would talk to Oscar for just a few minutes, and friendships were made. I told people that Oscar could make friends with a fence post. And that was a lesson that I picked up on right away, because we would just make cold calls to people and ask them about caves, and it wasn't any time we were on a first name basis. And that's something that I'll always appreciate. So Oscar was my true mentor. And I would recommend, if you're a young caver, that you get a mentor. Now, this cabin is just downstream from that other cabin where Bill Stevenson was. And that cabin was owned by Charlie Robertson. Actually, I think he rented it, but he was there with his family. And Charlie was a big, husky Marine and kind of scary, to tell you the truth. But I became pretty well acquainted with him because he had a daughter, and the daughter's name was Charlotte. And she was 16 and I was 16, and we got to be friends real quick. We caught each other's eye and became high school sweethearts. And it wasn't too long before we got pretty serious and got married at 20. And the kids came, and life went on. But we moved away from the valley. I was working for the shipyard in Newport News. And it was a wonderful job, but I missed the mountains and I missed the caves. So we moved back to the Shenandoah Valley, and that's when my caving career really started picking up steam. I met Ed Bauer. He's the guy on the left there. And between Ed and I, we gathered some friends around, and it was time to start a grotto, we thought. So we started the Shenandoah Valley Grotto. And the guy standing there in that sweater looking suave as Aki Lloyd. And Aki was a long-time caver. He taught us a lot also, and he knew where a lot of caves were. And we had our first meeting of the Shenandoah Valley Grotto at Aki Lloyd's house. And we had the second meeting. In fact, we had many meetings at Aki Lloyd's house until finally the success of our grotto was such that we couldn't fit in this house anymore. But Aki is a true friend. He was along, incidentally, on the C3 expedition at Flint Ridge, so he really has quite a career. And you know, Aki is 96 years old and still lives in that house. Good times back then. The grotto was very aggressive. We did a lot of projects. We dug open the Blowing Cave there in Bath County and got to the original section of it and found that the creek was lower than the river in the back, and that's another story. But had good times. Ed, though, and I started getting interested in going to some other places. We met John Holsinger. Now, John was working on the Virginia Cave Survey. Henry Douglas had completed his research on the Cave Survey and published Caves of Virginia in 1965. But John Holsinger knew that Henry had missed a lot of caves, particularly in southwest Virginia. So Ed and I decided we would get with John Holsinger, because John Holsinger has some pretty exciting stories that he was telling about the big caves he was finding in southwest Virginia. John, we called him Captain Karst. He was so popular at that time. And John was taking long trips on the Thanksgiving weekend down to Pennington Gap in Lee County to record all the caves that we were finding down there. Douglas had not taken many trips down to southwest Virginia at all, and he had just stopped at some point and made his print of the book, Caves of Virginia, in 1965. John took up the mantle from there and continued the survey and found there were just huge caves down in southwest Virginia, and he needed help. So he was gathering quite a crew to go down there. And that black arrow is pointing about where Pennington Gap is. And to let you know what a journey that was, this is before all the interstates. So you had to go Route 11 all the way down to when you got close to Lee County, and then you got off on secondary roads. Many of them didn't even have a line on them. I mean, that was rural, poor, poverty, Appalachia, Virginia at that time. You might remember Lady Bird Johnson wanted to fix that problem. And eventually she had the roads built, and the thing has changed now. But back then, it was like you were driving back in time 40 years. And to show you how remote that is from Richmond, there are 8 other state capitals closer to Pennington Gap than you are from Richmond. So it's quite a place. And we would stay in the Shelburne Hotel, the upper left-hand corner there. And the upper floor of that was mostly filled, the rooms were filled with coal miners with black lung disease. And they would cough all night, and it was quite an experience for me. I'd never seen anything like that. Rooms were cheap, though. They were about, I think, $3 a night or something like that. And that school bus down there, I think maybe that's a spoof there because they've misspelt school, but I think they may have done it on purpose. One of the things that intrigued me, to give you some idea of the history of the place, though, is that black bear was in the hotel restaurant, and it was made of arrowheads and spear heads that they had just collected locally right there in the valley. They didn't think anything of it. They found those all over the place. And those 2 local yokels, I thought I'd throw in for flavor, they're actually cavers. That's Russ Carter and Dave Collins, and they're putting on a little act there. But Pennington Gap was to describe that completely would be another 30 minutes of conversation. But we called our get-together the DOM, Dirty Old Men, because there wasn't any women coming, and I don't know why a woman would ever want to come to that place, as rough as it was back then. but it was like you would go to Virginia in the 1800s. If you want to know where a cave was, you just went to a house and asked, "Are there any caves around here?" And they would say, "Sure," and they give you directions. And these are caves that with big entrances. All the small stuff they didn't count as a cave, and we were just finding caves all over the place. And they were interesting caves. There on the right is a poem that goes back to the Hoover era, and it shows that there was political dissension even then. And that cave on the left, big entrance, is kind of typical of that area. And it wasn't uncommon at all to find saltpeter workings. In fact, the major industry back at that time was mining saltpeter. And where these caves were and how they found them is interesting. The ones in the main part of the valley you could walk to, but some of these up on the mountain, on the Cumberland Mountain, were very difficult to access. The geology is interesting also. There's a greenbrier limestone outcropping on Cumberland Mountain, but then you've got all these cross sections of different ages of rocks all the way back down to the Cambrian. And there are caves in each of those layers, and those layers would produce different kinds of caves. There's a lot of variety and a fascinating place to go. Now, I talked about the Cumberland Mountain. I've always said caves are where you find them, but it might be a little difficult to find some caves, and let me explain why. This is a picture of just one of the outcrops of the greenbrier limestone about halfway up the mountain there. And there's a cave there, but if you don't know exactly where the cave is and where the trail is to access it, you're going to find it very difficult to get to that cave, even knowing there's a cave there. But I took the next picture during the winter and to better show the outcrop of that greenbrier limestone. And you can see how steep it is. In many places it's just cliffs. And there's a lot of the greenbrier exposed there. And there are caves in it. Now, this is Pennington Gap. Down there on the lower left is where Cumberland Gap is. And the limestone is, you can follow that red line, exposed along the Cumberland Mountain. They changed the name of the mountain ridge from Cumberland to Rocky Mountain to Powell Mountain, but it's all the same mountain range. And it is 65 miles of exposed greenbrier limestone. And we know that down at Cumberland Gap, there's Gap Cave that has about 18 miles or so of cave. And up near Norton, upper right-hand side, is where Omega Cave is, at around 30 miles. There are other saltpeter caves. We don't know of any other caves in that vicinity except for the saltpeter caves. And the reason we know where those are is because the folks in the 60s, when we went to DOM, they knew where the saltpeter caves were because they had been told by their father and their father before them. And that was passed by word of mouth. And so when we got there, we got good directions so we could find those. That's not true today. We go there today and you ask the folks who live there now, they just don't know the mountains, don't know the land like their forefathers did. So that those caves we located back then and made a record of and so forth is good, because otherwise they would be lost forever. And it would be darn hard to find caves just by exploring that 65 miles of exposure. Now, that's not, that 65 miles is broken by a water gap here and there, but mostly it's intact. Holsinger and I decided that we'd rent a little Piper Cub and fly that exposure and just see how many cave entrances that we might see by the air. So we got with Charlie. He was the pilot. He agreed he'd do that. It was pretty inexpensive. And so we asked Charlie if he would fly us along the escarpment there, and he said, sure. Incidentally, later on we found that his name wasn't Charlie. It was crazy, Charlie. We wish we had known that to begin with, because when we asked him to fly as close as he dared to that exposure, whew, did he get close. I mean, I thought the wingtip was going to be scraping the limestone in places. And finally, we was hollering at him, back off. This limestone is going by us like a picket fence. We need to get back away. I mean, he was scaring us to death. And I had my camera, and Holsinger had a lap full of maps, and we thought we were going to locate these things. No way. We could never. After about 10 minutes, we didn't know where we were, but we were seeing limestone, and we were seeing big, what we thought might be entrances, but you know how it is when you're looking at limestone from even 200 feet away. You can't tell what's a shadow and what's an entrance, and even if there was an entrance there, if it was turned right, you still wouldn't see it. But we saw what could be dozens and dozens and dozens of cave entrances until we got down to Cumberland Gap. And we realized that there must be many, many caves, big caves on that mountainside. But how we're going to decide exactly where those entrances are from the valley floor, it's going to take some new technology. Maybe future cavers will enjoy those explorations. Okay, so I'm going to call that the golden years of Virginia exploration, because during that time we were just going to caves that had entrances that you could practically walk in. We weren't taking time to dig anything open. That's just what was there presented to us. Holsinger says, okay, and this is 1975. He says, I've got enough. I'm having it printed. It was printed, by the way, by the Division of Minerals and Mines, not Holsinger, and that caused some consternation. But these were Virginia's golden era of caves, and we heard over in West Virginia there was also some exploration going on. But Holsinger got with me during the DOM as he was publishing and says, Phil, he says, I know you're interested in caves. You've been with me all this time. Would you like to continue the cave survey? And I said, John, you know I do. What I think is so important to collect this data on caves that it needs to be continued. And so I did, and I threw my heart in it. I wanted to bring the cave survey up to date. We invested in furniture, proper furniture for the maps. We had something like 2,500 maps. File cabinets, all the thing had to go in a manila folder, each cave, and so it took several filing cabinets for that information. But most important, I got a computer, because I wanted to computerize. This is the computer age coming on. And I got a Macintosh, much to the consternation of a lot of my friends who said, no, don't get a Macintosh, get an IBM. This Apple, will be here today and gone tomorrow, but IBM will stick with us. Well, I certainly got the last laugh on that, because Apple is still with us and IBM is no longer making personal computers. But at any rate, I spent a good deal of my down caving time with the cave survey. And there's Dave Collins on the right. We hired him one summer to help in the process of computerizing all this. I wrote a computer, it didn't have any database programs for caves at that time, so I wrote a relational database so that we could better assimilate the data about caves. If you want to know how many caves are in the Greenbrier limestone over 3,000 feet that has saltpeter caves in them, and you could have that information. I spent 32 years being the president of the Virginia Cave Survey. And finally, I decided that I needed to let new blood come in, and I'm now a director in the Bath County. But the VSS is a part of me, and I've enjoyed that experience, and I'm glad that the VSS continues to flourish. Now, that information, you can see there's a display. I took the VSS on the road to conventions and so forth, and it started to get more attention as I did so. The state started getting interested in it, and thanks to John Wilson, John Holsinger, and others, we formed the Virginia Cave Commission. The state legislature established this as something that might be important. We had a 2-year contract, and when we got through with our assimilation of data and made a report, the legislators said that it was by far the best commission report of all the commissions they had. So they made us permanent. At some point, the name got changed to the Virginia Cave Board because of organizational issues, but we all took turns being the president of the cave survey. I did for a couple of years or so, I forget how many. And I also got involved, that led to other organizations like the CCV and CaveCon 1 and a lot of conservation organizations. But don't want to talk about that too much. I'm talking about caves, and one of the golden eras of caving is when the contact caves were being discovered and explored and surveyed there in central Greenbrier County. And that was a very exciting period. This is one of the many field houses that we had. I think that one's torn down now. We've now got our own field house that we own on a nice piece of land. But back in those days, it was pretty rough. But we enjoyed it because the contact caves, if you came there to survey on a weekend, if you didn't come away with a half mile of cave or a mile of cave, you just weren't even trying. It was exciting times. But the cave that really caught my attention was this one here. It's called Culverson Creek Cave. Big river cave, the biggest river cave in the state so far as I know. Certainly in that part of the state. Ed Bauer took me there, and we went through there, and I was blown away by the scope of this cave. And I decided that I wanted to know more about this cave, and I wanted to know about the survey. And so the fellows that joined me in this is Bill Royster and Bill Balfour. We were the three kingpins that led the survey. Actually, it started as a resurvey because there had been some attempts to understand the cave, but some of these surveys were not very accurate. They were done with 200-foot long steel tapes with blunt and compass in chest-deep water, and you can imagine how that went. And so finally we decided we'd just resurvey the whole thing. And we did that. It took us a decade. And the reason it took us so long is because you can't go into that cave if you're not watching the weather. If you're not careful, you go in, you get drowned. That's just the way it is. So here's a few of the pictures. And I got a lot of pictures, but I'm only going to show just a few of how magnificent it is. Now, this is not the main stream. This is a little side stream that Balfour is following. And here's one of Bill Jones in the Fuller Canyon. It looks like that big boulder's rolling towards him, like in the Indiana Jones movie. And if you follow in the main entrance, the one I showed at first, and you follow it for a mile downstream, you get to this log jam. Pretty good sized log jam. That's as far as you can go at that point. We've not been able to penetrate that. I suspect there's a siphon there, a constriction. There's a passage not too far from the log jam that Roger Broody and I went to. We had been several trips up there, and there was a place called Hurricane Lake. Hurricane Lake it's a near sump. It has airspace about like that, down to about like that. And the air is whipping through fast enough that it makes little riplets on the water. And about 110 feet long, and so you get pretty wet. And that's pretty cold water. That's just no surface stream coming in there. If it's summertime, it's not warm. And then beyond that, the passage keeps going, and we had spent another trip getting further down that passage, and we got to the top of a little drop about 30 feet. And so Roger and I had come back with a ladder, and we dropped down into a little slot canyon. I think we call it the Muddy Madness. And we followed that stream downstream, and it just didn't change in character. It just stayed sort of a muddy tube, maybe average 30 feet high and about 3 feet wide or so, but just kept going and kept going. And finally, Roger started to grumble that it was time to leave, and I kept saying, "Oh man, we're almost there." I wasn't sure where there was, but I assured him that something had to change, and we kept going. And just as I thought we were just going to have to turn around, we went around a corner, and it like we walked outside. There was just a big monster trunk passage, and there was a roar coming from this trunk passage. And we walked out into this trunk passage, into the stream, and it was like we walked into bathwater. And then we knew this was the main Culberson stream. And what we had done is make a connection to the fuller side of the cave system, tying the last of the three big components of this cave system together. And we've mapped about 20 miles of passage. There's still leads in that cave, but at that point, we decided that we had stopped our exploration of it and drew a map and so forth. And it's one of the most astonishing caves that, one of many astonishing caves that I've seen. Okay, so during a break on there, we went over to Dry Cave, found our way through the little sump in Dry Cave, and it's probably the most beautiful cave in Greenbrier County. Just jam full of formations. It's in the Silurian limestone on the east side of the Greenbrier River, but still in Greenbrier County. Really neat cave. So finally I reached the point in life where it's retirement. And I took early retirement because I wanted to see what I could do with the Virginia Cave Survey. The VSS, I should say. We have, I never could have time when I was working for a career to give it all that it deserved. And it's a huge job. The VSS can be as big a job as you want to make it. But I took early retirement, and Bill Royster beside me there, he made this road sign saying, "Old Caver Playing." And that's certainly an appropriate sign, because this old caver did play during his retirement. And I thought it'd be fun to show you what the sequence is as you begin caving up to you retire. And it wasn't a true retirement for me because I kept caving. But anyway, here goes. So you start out at 16, and then you find your sweet thing, and then you start your family. And then you get to be a professional caver as you get more and more experience. But then calamity. You start becoming successful in your work, and that leads to being high enough of a management that you're part of the management culture. And that's me on the right. We're golfing. You can see I'm getting a little thick around the middle there. I'm not having fun. You know, if you're in corporate, you've got to do time on the golf course, because there's a lot of business that takes place on the golf course. And so this is the other half of me that was being very successful, but it wasn't my thing. And I suffered a midlife crisis, a severe midlife crisis. And I said, what am I going to do? This is not what I intended to be. I was making some money, but what was I going to do? So I decided that I would take up bodybuilding. And I had a lot of fun with that. And then I decided to take up racquetball. Anyway, I broke out of my midlife crisis and got back into caving again, the caving the way it should be. And then here I am today, going from 16 to 70s, although I had retired when I was just over 50 years old. So we now live in that house with the red roof there. Actually, it's the only house there with the red roof, but we live in the northern end of the Burnsville Cove, the home of the Butler Cave Conservation Society. We've surveyed about 70 or 80 miles of cave in the cove there, and there's more to be found. And when wife and I bought that property, it's a terminal sink at the end of a blind valley that's about a mile long, and was centuries of old logs and things washed in. And I heard the fellow that we bought the property from say to someone else, he didn't think I was hearing him, "It's just an old snake hole." And I could tell, and he was deathly afraid of snakes. And so he didn't want it and I wanted it. He didn't know that I wanted it that bad, but his snake hole was my paradise. So we bought it from him, and we got to work on all those logs being washed in, burned up, I don't know how, hundreds of cords of wood. Finally got it open, even had a bulldozer come in and make a little meadow there. And that's the way it looked there for a while. And on the other side of the hill was a cave called Owl Cave. Actually, we changed the name of these two caves. We had a different name, but we changed the name to Owl Cave. It looked like owl eyes to us. And so this is a cave that we also call the Kids Cave, because you can turn the kids loose in there and they can scramble all over the place, but there's no pit for them to fall down or anything like that. The RAS cavers and BCCS cavers who have got kids now, they bring them over to Owl Cave for their introduction to caving. Okay, so I looked around. There's evidence there are caves to be found. One piece of evidence is, look at these karst springs. This is the big karst spring. During a flood, the river's muddy, but the spring's pushing out clear water and does so for 18 hours before its muddy pulse comes through. Takes a lot of cave for that much water to come through, so you know there's cave to be found in the headwaters of this spring. I got into dye tracing. Did a lot of dye tracing up in that neck of the woods and found some fascinating resurgences in areas where there's evidence of large cave streams. And Bill Jones lives not far from me, and Bill Jones has got the machine to test the water, and he's also a good companion when it comes to tagging along with me to do my dye tracing, and conversely I'll tag along with him. So we've got a pretty good handle on some of the underground streams. And the one on the left there is almost an 8-mile long trace, and it goes through a lot of karst, and we don't know of a single cave in that area. On the right's Bill Jones and Ron Simmons standing at the resurgence of that spring. It comes up in a big boil in the bed of the Jackson River. Here's another. I'm only going to show you a couple here, but this is the Pasture River. Part of the flow of the Pasture River goes underground, and in the summer when it gets dry, the Pasture River the surface stream is just a dry riverbed. But the underground stream flows underneath the eastern flank of the Bull Pasture Mountain for a good long ways. It's a 5-mile trace. And what's really interesting is we know, because of the geology, that the underground Pasture River flows underneath the Bull Pasture River at Williamsville. So there you got one river going underneath another river. And we know there's a big cave underneath the Bull Pasture Mountain if we could ever find a way into it, which I'm sure someone will one of these days. Another thing I got interested in was air currents. This is a pipe entrance to a cave, this part of the Water Saints Cave. And I've taken a regular household fan, 30 inches diameter, and I've plugged up to a generator and And I'm pushing air into the cave because there's a hole about 100 feet away that I think is probably connected, and I just wanted to see if I could verify that by turning this fan on. Well, and it did. One thing led to another, and we asked ourselves, you know, if you've got an entrance here and another entrance that's a mile away, can we do the same thing and see if we can detect the change of the airflow at the other entrance? And we found that we could do that, and we did do that. We refined our anemometers to where we could detect very small changes in air pressure, but we found that it was successful, and this is just one of the many entrances that has shown to be connected with another cave entrance. You see there's a very clear signal there. And by doing that, we've determined if you've got an entrance here and an entrance over here that's 2 miles away, and there's no known cave between them, but you've got an air connection between these two caves, then you can only conclude there's got to be a cave there that we haven't found yet. So there are many ways that we can establish that there are caves to be found. Incidentally, we presented this paper at the 2009 International Congress, and also it was in combination with the NSS convention in Texas. And it was well received, and at the end of our talk we put our little beanie caps on put a little humor in it. But we got good applause and much interest from their experiments. Okay, so what I have concluded is most of our really significant caves have not yet been found. And we have established to some degree that Rain Curl's hypothesis that most caves don't have entrances to be true here in the Burnsville Cove, because most all of our major caves we've dug open. But I've been doing some poking around in Bath County. I'm going to show you that there is much to be found, and I contend that the golden age of caving is happening right now. I could spend several minutes talking about the various discoveries that we've made. That what needs to take place is project caving, and they're doing that a lot up in West Virginia with the Maxwellton Cave, the new discoveries there, where you have to establish camps and so forth. We've done that here in the Cove. The other thing is through project digs, and by that I mean not a cave that you can dig open in an afternoon, but something that takes some concerted effort. And this is that little meadow I showed you earlier there at the water sink. So what happened is the part that wasn't up against the cliff fell in during a flood, and in fact a pretty good volume fell in. So I got down through all that debris and found some air coming up and dug it open, and that pipe represents the connection down to a part of the cave called the subway. And all it took was a hammer drill and about 4 dozen soda straws, and we were in. This is the beginning of the subway passage, and if you look very carefully down to the left of that rock, you can see a person. And so when we saw that rock down there, we named that the really big rock. Not a very imaginative name, but that's what we chose. And this cave has just got large volumes in it, and it's a fun cave to explore. That's my wife with me on the left side. She'll go in a cave that I find if it's on our property. That's about as much of a caver that she wants to be, but she certainly enjoys caves and supports me 100%. Now, there was another sinkhole on the property that we dug into, and that's called Halleck Cave. And that one is the biggest cave on the property. We've surveyed over 7.5 miles, and it is a remarkable cave. Here's a place called the Slick and Slide Room. It goes through a fault The ceiling moved one direction, the floor the other, and you see the slick and slides, which is a geologic term. And you have to go through there where the lower plate dropped down a bit and opened it up. And this cave has got beautiful places in it. It's scattered throughout the cave. It's just a remarkable cave. It's named for hallectites, so it's got more hallectites almost everywhere. And it's in the Licking Creek limestone, and you can see all the fossils that are just lying there on that shelf. We didn't put them there. They were just there. A lot of fossils in the limestone. Now down the road a ways on my neighbor's property, there was a groundhog hole blowing air. And I asked the neighbor if we couldn't dig there, and she says, by all means. The dig got a little out of hand there, but we had to use some equipment to get the pipes down deep enough, and from there we had to dig even deeper. We were in sandstone, going through the Riskiness sandstone, and we had to go through 80 vertical feet of the Riskiness sandstone before we hit the limestone. But it was well worthwhile. This is on the left, we've got a double wide pipe. The initial entrance is about 40 feet deep, and we built a wishing well cap on it. I painted the steel casing to make it look like rock, and of course we named the cave Wishing Well. And this cave on the left is a huge room. It's got formations all over the place, just gorgeous cave. And it's also got this strange jelly-like filaments, biofilm, I believe they call it. And it's alive, and it's growing in this little stream. And Dr. Jen McAlady from Penn State is studying that, and the only thing that she can find that's close to it grows in the tropics. And this is not the tropics here in Highland County. So that's interesting. Now I'll show you some other caves that, I should back up and say that we're trying to connect hallectite to Wishing Well. We know that they connect because of the air currents. We've proven that. And what we need to do is and it's about 300 feet we have to go to connect them. And just for fun, I put up a bucket counter there so we can keep track of who's hauled how many buckets out through the dig. And the little sled there you see is a contraption that I made that we call the rover. And that wire you see was an electrical connection so we could communicate from one end to the other. And that has since does not work any longer. What I've done now is, low frequency travels further down a cave passage than a high frequency. That's why in a cave, if you're coming up on a stream, it sounds like a big creek before you get to it. But the closer you get to it, the smaller it gets. So I've come up with you've always got PVC pipe there for your sled to slide on. But I found you can take a piece of PVC pipe and make a low frequency horn. That travels a good distance down the cave passage. Okay, so getting back to some of our discoveries, all these were dug open. This is Russell's Reserve Cave. Beautiful cave. It's got unusual fossils in it. This is a Pleistocene black bear skull, and not far away there was a tapir. A tapir is now extinct in North America, but it was also dated from the Pleistocene era. You're just seeing a tiny glimpse of this cave. It's about 4 miles long or so. This is Al Grimm coming into the top of what we call the firehouse, going into Serpent Cave. And we had to dig several places to get into this cave. But it's a neat cave. It's got all kinds of neat formations and big passages. And I think we've surveyed about 3.5 miles in there. Got antler hallectites and just neat stuff. Here's, I'm just showing you a smattering of these caves. This is cliffs in the face of, cave entrances in the face of this cliff there along the Pasture River near Deep Hollow. I thought for sure we'd find a good cave in those entrances, but no, we didn't. We found it by digging out a little air hole on the bank close by. And what's neat about that cave is it's got the skinniest little totems, broomstick totems in that cave. It's really skinny. Since I've been retired, I've been fortunate to find about 35 miles or so of virgin cave, and there's more out there. I've really only scratched the surface. This is over in the Warm Springs Valley, over in the Ordovician limestone. Had a small hole out behind the Garth Music Center. The chef was out looking for mushrooms and saw a bat fly out of this little hole. Told Bill Jones about it. Bill told me, so I came over with Mark and Vonnie, and anyway, we opened, and I think Al Grimm too. We uncapped that cave, and we call it Music Box, and it's just full of pits. It's got horizontal passage in there too, but there's a lot of pits in that cave, pretty little pits. I said I was getting to the point where I knew that my caving career was coming to an end as various body parts fell off, but I wanted to find one more big one. So all of us want to find one more big one, but I want to find one more big one before I had to quit. And that came true when one of John Haynes' students, John Haynes is a geologist at JMU, was doing a science trying to date water there in the Hot Springs Valley. And she was needing to get into Warm River Cave, and we got permission from the owner, who is now a close friend, to go into the cave. And I told the gang that was going with me, I said, I mapped this cave in 1969, or was it 66? At any rate, I mapped this cave a long time ago, and it was only found 1,800 feet of passage, but there was a big stream in the cave that went in the breakdown with good airflow coming through it, and I just knew that cave had to extend. I told the guys, I promise you, there's cave beyond. Bring your hammer drills, and we'll see if we can find that cave. And we did, and it is a marvelous cave. This is John Haynes. You can see the steam coming off the water. The other is the entrance, by the way, and there's stream passage galore in there, and it's thermal water. This is the largest thermal cave in the United States, and we think maybe it's the second largest in the world. And it has got neat stuff in it because it's a thermal cave. You would expect to find different things in there, but it's pleasant to explore. Now, leaving that off, we'll come back to the water sinks here. I've decided to make the water sinks into a karst preserve area. So I've built karst trails and swinging bridges going across waterfalls and along hillsides back down to the water sinks meadow. There's a stone kiosk that explains what you're seeing, and this is the water sinks meadow as it looks now. And I've built a little walkway through a part of the cave about 400 feet so that visitors can see the reef that the trail goes through. It's a reef that was developed in the ocean floor, and the caves developed in that part of the reef. And a lot of neighbors and friends and visiting dignitaries and so forth take advantage of that because they don't really want to go into a wild cave, but they're willing to walk through a wooden boardwalk, short trip to a cave, and I have enjoyed that. Now, of course, all the caves that we've been discovering and so forth, if you've got a camera, and you absolutely must take a camera with you on every single caving trip, or you're irresponsible, and you've got to survey it. So you must survey, and you must take a camera with you, and to make a proper record of the cave. And doing so, some of the pictures I took turned out pretty good, and gathered up a few of the ribbons. I don't know if I got them all there, but I've got a few ribbons. And also, when you draw the maps, if you do a good job, you might enter that into the cartography salon. And so I've been fortunate there. Also, I've written a couple books, mostly here at the Water Sinks, and I've been co-author for a number of other books. These aren't all, but just a few. So I've been busy with my writing also. And this is my last slide. I'm going to say what's most important about caving, aside from the caves themselves, are the lifelong friendships that you make in caving. The friends that you make in caving are precious, and they do last a lifetime. And that is a significant aspect of caving. Thanks a lot for watching. I hope I haven't gone too long and you gave up on me. Thanks.